Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another episode review from the classic Are You Afraid of the Dark television series. Today we're going to be looking at an episode from season 6. It was written by Eric Weiner, and it was directed by Mark Soulard, and the episode in question is The Tale of the Secret Admirer. Now, The Tale of the Secret Admirer has to be one of the best Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes ever. Yes, I said it. A season 6 Are You Afraid of the Dark episode is one of the best. I don't only feel that way about this episode. My personal favorite episode from the show, The Tale of Vampire Town, is in this season. And trust me, I've seen every episode casually of this show, so I can speak on this. I cannot stress to you how underrated some season 6 episodes are in this series and how the season as a whole gets dunked on by fans historically. This and Vampire Town are probably my two favorites from the whole show. I might be getting way ahead of myself when I say that, but The Tale of the Secret Admirer, especially since the first time I saw it, which this was one of the last Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes I needed to watch to finish out the show, it impressed me to the point where I immediately told a bunch of people to go check it out. And so many people since then that have watched it because I recommended it to them have also said that this is one of their favorites, if not their favorite episode from the whole show. And it's incredibly made. And it's shocking how under talked about it is because it's not in the first 5 seasons of this television series. It's a shame, but I can kind of see why. You know, if you don't know anything about the history of Are You Afraid of the Dark, the first 5 seasons pretty much started the genesis of the golden age of kids horror alongside Goosebumps. And the show kind of ran from 1992 until around 1996, went off the air, and then it came back in 1999 and 2000. And season 6 and 7 are known as the revival seasons, where Nickelodeon trying to bring it back with an all-new Midnight Society. And those seasons aren't as revered as the first 5 because they weren't part of the original run. And also people associate the quality difference and, you know, it doesn't really feel like the same show, but it is the same show. And I have to say, like I said, it's a shame. It's a shame because this episode has to be one of the most overlooked hidden gems of the show's history. I know I'm going to keep saying that, but I highly recommend you check this out, especially if you've only ever seen the first 5 seasons of Are You Afraid of the Dark, or maybe if you've never seen an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, you need to check this out. And this episode reminds me of why I think Are You Afraid of the Dark and The Haunting Hour, which came out essentially years later, almost a full decade later, were pretty much, you know, kind of related to each other. And in a lot of ways, The Haunting Hour is the spiritual successor of Are You Afraid of the Dark, because both of these shows have this variety to them that just Goosebumps and The Nightmare Room and other shows didn't really feel like they had. And this episode, you'll notice, does not feel like your typical kids horror episode because it really is pseudo young adult. You know, it's like something that you would expect to be in like a Fear Street book or a Fear Street plot, but it's toned down to be in kids horror, or a kids horror show, I should say in this case. So if you're fans of, you know, weird stuff like that, or you want something as a change up to Monster of the Week or something typical that you'll find in kids horror, go check this out. So with that out the way, let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the story starts off with the Midnight Society, like every Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. And the story is usually told by whoever's turn it is in the Midnight Society to share their story. And the person, you know, that was chosen to be the narrator for this episode starts off the story, and we meet a girl named Meggie. I don't know if that's a real name. I think it's her nickname. She is kind of like a shy, quiet girl. In that stereotypical 90s kind of way. She has the Jennifer Love Hewitt, I Know What You Did Last Summer haircut with the bangs and the frayed, you know, long hair with the curly tips. That was such a thing. And she wears like turtleneck sweaters, and she doesn't really get a lot of male attention, let's just say. And she's in the lunchroom one day, just, you know, eating lunch, minding her own business. And she gets, you know, some attention, let's just say, from a secret admirer who writes these notes to her. And she gets this note saying, hey, I'm going to, I think I like you, or whatever the case is, and you should meet me by your locker. And when she goes to the locker, she sees this boy who's kind of like this stereotypical jock guy that she has a crush on, and she thinks it's him. But because he's around his two buddies who think that the girl's kind of shy and nerdy and kind of pick on him about possibly liking her, he kind of acts like a jerk towards her, and it really hurts her feelings. And this upsets her to the point where she goes home and she is really upset about the whole ordeal. And as she's lying in bed sulking about the situation, her mother comes to console her, and her mom is like, hey, look, you're my daughter, you're plenty attractive, guys would be crazy not to be into you. And she's like, well, I'm not you, Mom. I didn't have the same upbringing you did. I don't have it as easy as you did. Guys are just not into me. And you get the sense that the girl's kind of, suffering from a deflated ego from the situation, or maybe just an historical, history of being rejected by guys, or not having a lot of male attention. While that kind of sends a weird message in the story, you do feel that really does play a role in how she feels about herself and her self-esteem. And you really empathize with her on that. But very quickly, after she has the conversation with her mother, I should say, her parents end up leaving the house, and she's left home alone. And it's a really windy night. It's cold outside. She decides to go downstairs to, maybe make some food or something. And she thinks that she hears a noise coming from, around the door area. And then the door kind of blows open. She has to close it. She's like, why is the door open? Is somebody in the house? She starts to get paranoid, essentially. And she is freaked out. She wanders upstairs. She happens across her own bathroom. And while in the bathroom, she is experiencing some hysteria. She starts screaming because she thinks somebody's in the shower. Luckily, the guy from earlier, the jock guy that was a jerk, hears her screams, jumps in the house to try to save her, rescues her in the bathroom, but it turns out it's a fake out. There's something hanging up in the in the bathtub area on where the shower curtain would hang. And she's completely embarrassed by the situation, but the jock guy is like, it's fine. I was just trying to do the right thing. And he decides to essentially apologize for being a jerk earlier. And she's like, okay. And she starts to think that maybe he is the secret admirer writing her these notes. And she essentially kind of teases to him, hey, are you my secret admirer? And he goes, no. And she's like, well, that's kind of weird, but okay. He bids farewell, leaves. She's again left in the house alone. She goes back up to the bathroom to wash her face. But then as soon as she does that, she's greeted by a vision of this person with like a half-burned face coming after her from behind the mirror. And she starts screaming. This makes her panic. And her family comes up to console her because they just got home. And I kind of skimmed over another detail, but early on, while she was in the house alone, she thought that she might have saw some lipstick writing on the mirror of her bathroom that also added to the situation. But after that ordeal, she tries to tell her parents, semi-off-screen, semi-on-screen of this event and how it really messed with her mind. Later on, when she's at school, the jock guy that was trying to be nice, earlier, he's around his friends again, and he's trying to stick up and do the right thing for her and, say, hey, look, you guys are being jerks. I can talk to whoever I want to talk to. And talking to her about it more, he kind of learns that there's some more notes being put onto her locker and stuff. And even his locker being like threatening him to stay away. He confronts her about it and says, hey, look, does your secret admirer leave threats? And she's like, oh, this is getting out of hand. And I'm sorry that you're getting involved in this. And he's like, no, well, I want to help you. If he's coming after me, this guy sounds like bad news. And then later on, she gets a note that he's aware of. and he learns that he wants her to meet her at this wood shop in the school, because I guess that's where he wants to kind of reveal his love for this girl. So the guy takes it upon himself to go to the school late at night, I guess at the time period where the secret admirer wants to meet Meg, and he wants to handle it himself so Meggie doesn't get put into trouble. Meanwhile, Maggie's at home. She's trying to meet up with the secret admirer. She's talking with her parents, and she brings up these notes from the secret admirer. And when she brings up that the note was, pinned to a Meggie, it kind of triggers something with her mom that makes her kind of break down and leave the room. And she's like, well, why is mom acting like that? And then the dad reveals a big bombshell, a big recontextualization moment about this note and how weird it sounds. And he's like, I know you've been going through these weird things, but a similar thing happened to your mom and I when we were in high school. There's a guy named Teddy who was obsessed with your mom, wrote her notes like in the fashion that you've been receiving. But I thought it was kind of creepy and it was freaking your mom out. So I decided to confront him in the wood shop back in the day. And a whole thing escalated and a fire broke out, and it possibly took Teddy's life. And that's a secret I've been withholding from you for this entire situation, and I apologize. And Meg's like, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? And he was like, well, I was afraid of how you would react. And through that conversation, Maggie realizes that the jock guy that's been nice to her and that she has a crush on might be going to interact with this secret admirer at the school. So she decides to run to the school to see if he's in danger. And of course, while this conversation with the father is going on simultaneously, is going through this whole ordeal inside the wood shop where there's a figure in there who's pretty much like Two-Face from Batman. He's like burnt half on his right half, but his left half is like fine. Or maybe it's vice versa, I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. All it is that he looks really creepy, and there's some solid body horror involved with that. And essentially Teddy, who's revealed to be, I guess, the spirit of the secret admirer that's come back, wants to essentially kill Maggie's crush to get him out of the picture. And that's the whole thing. He's kind of orchestrated this to get the guy out of the way. But he did not anticipate that she would show up and try to protect him. And he's like, well, look at what I made you. And he looks and he shows her this thing that he made in the wood shop of these two hearts with like Meggie written on it. And she's like, well, I came here to tell you that I don't feel the same way about you. And this makes him kind of snap. And he does something to himself that causes a big CGI explosion. But luckily for Meggie and her crush, they make it out unscathed. And they kind of talk after this situation, and they realize that there might be some mutual feelings with each other, and they might entertain moving forward with that. And then we get to see the aftermath of the fire and what it's left behind inside of the wood shop. And then the story fades to black. The Are You Afraid of the Dark Midnight Society panelists, or I guess members, I don't know why I call them panelists, they send off the story, and then the episode ends. So that in a nutshell is what you're going to expect out of the Tale of the Secret Admirer. Now, here's the thing about the Tale of the Secret Admirer that I think sets it apart from pretty much every other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode that I've ever seen. What this episode is able to do is make a suspenseful, tense, and scary atmospheric product. And when I say that, I mean it. This has to be one of the best, if not the best directed episode in the whole show, bar none. There's something about it that gets under your skin in that, light, pseudo, young adult, creepy, suspense thriller way. And this episode does a really great job at pacing the story, about building up tension, about having its red herrings with characters, leaving it open-ended with the crush, possibly this other guy who might be stalking her outside of her house. He has some, a half-burnt face. There's some love notes being written on a mirror. There's something about it that gets under your skin, especially in the scenes when Maggie's in the home by herself. The way that's shot is so incredible. I have to tip my hat off to the showrunners who decided to go with this direction. I mean, you can clearly tell that they were taking a lot of inspiration from movies of the time, especially I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think the casting of the main character, Maggie, was done on purpose because she almost looks like a dime store version of Jennifer Love Hewitt. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as kind of like a meta nod, and in a good way, to that movie and of how that was kind of growing back in popularity. These teenage suspense thriller movies were making a rise. And I have to say, they made a really good casting choice with her because her character was really riveting and her acting performance was really well done. I mean, her parents were also well acted. Her crush was well acted. Teddy, the main villain, was well acted. Not only did he look creepy too, but he had a legitimate threat to him. There's just something about this story. It's so simple that you might think it's nothing special on the surface, but when you watch this thing, it makes you feel a certain way. And this is one of the only Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes I can clearly say without a shred of a doubt, I am confident, will kind of creep you out in that visceral way, or sometimes even cerebral ways, especially if you are somebody that gets more scared when you have to think about things. This episode will bring that out of your brain. It's just something about it that works so well for how simple it is. And this kind of shows that you don't need an outlandish concept or something out of the box to stand out in Are You Afraid of the Dark. You know, most of the time when you hear people praise these episodes from this show, they talk about Ghastly Grinner and how different he is for being like a crazy clown comic villain. Or they'll talk about the pool zombie with how creepy that orange tone brings out the effects of the monster there. But when you have something like this, they're not really relying on the shock value of a monster. They're kind of relying on the suspense of the story and how unsettling it is and the plot twists in a traditional suspense thriller way. And I was shocked by how well Eric Weiner, I don't know how you say his last name, I apologize if I'm butchering it, but there's a way that he wrote this that I think was translated onto screen beautifully by Mark Soulard. And I have to say, I've seen pretty much every Mark Soulard episode that he made, and he made quite a few in this show. He put his best into this episode, and I can say that with a hard confidence. This was well made, through and through. I really don't have much objective flaws with the story. I mean, I see the symmetry here, and the one thing that I think the story does super well, and what makes it kind of stand out from the rest, even though, like I said, concept-wise, it might not be the most special thing ever, but it comes down to the plot twists, and how that hits you. Especially the father plot twist in the story is absolutely shocking, especially the first time you watch it. You're going to be like, holy crap, that's a really good tie-in. And how all these events might be kind of vague, but you get the understanding that all these events started because there is a connection, and this might be mild spoiler territory. I don't want to get too much into depth with it, but there might be a connection to Maggie and her mother in relation to this Teddy and Teddy's ghost that kind of implies that age and, coming of age play a role into why these events have started, and maybe what has conjured Teddy or his spirit to come back and want to, I guess, relive the moment that caused his death. And I have to say, all the twists in the story and the angles here, they're done in a magnificent way. I mean, I know I keep boasting this episode up, but I really have no flaws with this story. Genuinely. If we're talking like outside of my specific love for The Tale of Vampire Town, this clearly has to be the best executed and just best overall Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. And I know that might be a controversial take for a lot of diehard fans out there. Some people might want to beat me over the head for saying that, but I really do mean that. Like, maybe the other two contenders that could be close to this, maybe Water Demons or maybe The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, or maybe The Tale of the Night Shift. But those pretty much make up the rest of my top 5 of the show. Getting another thing way ahead of myself out there about my top 5. But still, like, this episode is so criminally overlooked, and it's such a just... magnificent time to be had. I mean, every time I watch this episode, I have a ball with it. And it's one of those things that I would classify as a hidden gem through and through. Like, if I've ever seen any clear examples of hidden gems in kids horror, this is that. Yeah, go check this episode out. If I had to give this thing a rating from a 0 to 5 star basis, I'd easily give this a 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely amazing. And that's just how I feel, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Especially for people who like to diss on Season 6 and Season 7, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and don't like any of these episodes. I challenge you on this one. So, there you go. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Tale of the Secret Admirer. Let me know down in the comments section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.